Hello, everyone. I'm Jane Ubel from Drive Safe, Ride Safe. And as you know, I'm with veteran crash investigator and driver safety expert Mike Pehl. And we have special guests here today, Tara and Nathaniel. And they are here to talk about the call no parent wants to answer. We welcome you here, and we welcome our guests today who are going to tell us their story and the lessons that you can learn from them today. Okay, so right now, Tara, can you kind of tell us a little bit about what happened the night that you got the phone call?
Sure. We were at our campground and we have very poor cell service there. So we got a phone call. It popped through my husband's phone and it was Nathaniel. And he said he ruined his truck. He said, my truck is bad, or my dad truck bad is all we heard through the spotty service. So in order to get cell reception at our campground, we have to go up top by the flagpole. So we immediately jumped on the golf cart and went up top and tried to call him back. We called him back, no answer. We called him back, no answer. We called him back a third time, and then he answered. And then halfway through that conversation, he quit talking to us. As he was talking to my husband, I jumped on my phone and tried to locate his phone through we have Life 360 on our phones. But he had shut that location off, so we didn't know where he was. Just then, we lost service again. We called back, and then we had somebody named Leanne answer his phone. My husband was on the phone, and I was still trying to call. At this time, I called our other son to see if he could locate a snap map to see where his location was. And Leanne had said that he was in an accident in her driveway. And we asked, did you call the cops? Did you call the ambulance? And she was not quite sure. She's like, I don't remember. I said, well, did you call the cops? You need to stay calm. And she goes, I think so. And just then we could kind of hear the sirens. So we heard the sirens coming. And when the sirens got closer, where we were was about 15 minutes from the hospital in town. And where he was only about 1.5 miles. So we just figured we'd meet the ambulance at the hospital. We did not know how severe it was. All Leanne could tell us is his head was bleeding bad, and he was awake sometimes, and then he would pass out sometimes. So he was going in and out of consciousness, and there was a lot of blood. And she wasn't quite sure what she should do.
And so after that, you went to the hospital, and then what happened?
Yeah, so we were at the hospital. We actually beat the ambulance there. So we were at the hospital. Our hospital has a waiting room, and then they have an entrance to the waiting room. So we had to wait into the first entrance because of COVID screening. And my husband was wondering why we weren't able to get in. Well, our hospital does not staff their ER. We're a rural hospital. So we figured that the receptionist and the nurse were working with Nathaniel, and the doctor had to be called in. So after about 15 minutes of being at that hospital, 15, 20 minutes, the doctor came out. We got a phone call first, and I said, well, we're actually in the waiting room. We're waiting to come in. And all he did was give me a big hug, and he said, you need to drive I suggest you drive to St. Mary's. He will be airlifted immediately. And we asked, is he okay? And he said, I suggest you drive to St. Mary's, because he's going to be airlifted. So at that time, he couldn't tell us anything else. So we got a few things. We got in our car and we started making that hour and 15-minute drive up to St. Mary's. When we got to St. Mary's, we went to the waiting room. We got to go through, the guards, and we went to the receptionist. And they just told us to take a seat in the waiting room. Nurses would come out, kind of whisper a little bit. Not whisper and point, but you feel like everybody's pointing at you at that moment. Finally, somebody came out, and they brought us to a little room it was a brown painted room with red leather couches, Bibles and Kleenexes everywhere. And we had found out that it was called the grief consultation room, is what the name of the room was. So at this point, we weren't quite sure if our son was alive or not, and if he had any injuries, because we were not told anything. So once we got to that point, we sat in the room, and the nurse came in a few times. And every time she came in, we just said, Is our son alive? Let me get you a doctor. You know, somebody else would come in. Is our son breathing? Is he alive? Can you blink if he's alive? Like, can you give us some kind of sign? Let me get you a doctor. At this time, we did not understand why we weren't able to get his information. All we wanted to know is, was our son alive? And they couldn't tell us anything. So finally, after about an hour of sitting in this room, I looked at my husband and I said, you know what, we need to be prepared for the worst. We have to be prepared that they're going to bring us paperwork for organ donation. And we have to be willing to sign, because that is what Nathaniel would want. We need to be able to do this request for him. So as my husband and I were talking about that and making ourselves mentally and physically and emotionally prepared to do that, the nurse came in again. Again, we asked, is our son alive? Let me get you a doctor. No doctor ever came in. And finally, it was about 2:30 in the morning. The crash happened at 9:45. A little bit before 9:45, I guess. And they just kept asking. You know, when they came in, we'd ask the question. They'd say, we'll get you a doctor. Finally, the nurse comes in, and I just pretty much pleaded with her, like, as a parent, is my son alive? And she goes, he is sitting up and he is talking. Would you like to see him? We both said absolutely right away. His head was bleeding profusely, with a huge gash on the back of his head. They couldn't staple it at that time because they still weren't sure if he needed a fourth CT. He already had 3 at that time. So she wanted to make sure that we were going to be okay with seeing all of this. So when we walked into the room, Nathaniel was in a neck brace on a backboard and was not able to move a lot. But when we saw him, it was like the sigh of relief that he was going to be okay. And he gave us a little thumbs up. And he started asking the questions. Where was he? What happened? Did he hurt anybody else? He had no idea what happened. He had no idea where he was. He didn't remember his helicopter ride. And the nurse had told us his tox screen came back, no drugs or alcohol in the system. So they knew he wasn't intoxicated or on something. And that his CT came back with no broken bones, no lesions, no major head trauma other than the gash, and then a little bit of swelling.
All right. All right. Well, you know, Tara, this is quite the story, and obviously it's a very emotional one for a parent. No, that's all right. Nathaniel, first of all, let's start with, how does it make you feel when you hear your mother's reaction to what happened?
It's just something that, you know, you don't want anything bad like that to have your parents go through that. And it's just hard seeing it.
About what you're, sorry. So tell me about what you remember or what you think happened that night with your truck.
I don't remember much at all. As time goes on more, I keep getting, you know, a couple seconds here and a couple seconds there, but I can't remember vividly anything from around 8:30 when I got off work milking cows till when they put it was one of the last staples in. They put, I think it was 16, and I don't remember much, but as time goes on, I remember a little more. After work, I went home, and I went to town to hang out with one of my friends, and he told me, he said, we stopped. It's this place called Southside. It's where a lot of younger kids hang out, and, you know, it's just a parking lot. We'd go there and eat food, and we got breadsticks and a 12-pack of Mountain Dew, and we were sitting there, and I'm like, well, what are we gonna do tonight? And he's like, well, there's a bonfire over in New Hampton, which is about 45 minutes south of Cresco. And I was like, all right, well, let's go. And he said, we're going, turned down the gravel, and then he told me that he hit a stop sign and turned left because that's which way New Hampton would be. And he didn't know where I was, thought I was a little farther ahead than he had thought, and because we were on a gravel road. And I ended up calling him it was 10:47. He said the call came in, and I told him that I had just totaled my truck. Well, he said he turned around and backtraced all his steps. He didn't know where I was. Well, it turns out the force of the impact disconnected my battery. So obviously the motor wasn't running, but all my lights were shut off because there was no battery. And so it was dusty, and he drove right past. To this day, he still feels bad about it. But then he told me when he got there, all he saw was an ambulance door shut, and they took me away in the ambulance. And then I don't remember anything at all. I remember stumbling a little around my truck, and then I don't remember anything else until the doctor came in, and he goes, "Well, this one's gonna sting," and because the doctor had to push the head wound together, and then they had to staple it, and I only remember the last 3 staples. And then I remember I walked out, and mom and dad went to get the car, and I was talking to there was a guy sitting at the door, and I remember talking to him a little bit, like, "Hey, how's it going?" Whatever. And then next thing I knew, I woke up the next morning.
Well, thank you, Nathaniel. I'm going to point to your mother first before I talk to you again. Tara, as a mom, when you saw this truck, what happened? How did you feel?
That is actually the first time I cried, was when I saw the truck. So the whole night, waiting, I called it mom mode. I went into mom mode, wasn't allowed to like really feel anything because out of the 6 of us, Nathaniel was hurt. And my other 3 kids were at home and my husband. So I saw that the image when we pulled into the salvage yard, and my heart just sank. And that's the first time I realized how close Nathaniel was to dying. And we saw where he crawled out of his window. That's when we realized how bad the crash really was.
Right, a reality for sure. So Nathaniel, what do you think when you see this?
What I think of first is really what saved me was my seatbelt. If I wouldn't have had it on, I would have been laying on the other side of the driveway. Seatbelt's always been, it don't matter how far you're going. It don't matter if it's a mile or 100 miles. If you don't have your seatbelt on, then, anything could go wrong. And I had my seatbelt on, and when I was younger and I was hanging out with my grandpa, he always told us, your stomach should be about 12 inches away from the steering wheel, so a foot. We'd always take a piece of paper and set it by our stomachs, and all right, we're a foot away. Well, I like to sit a little farther back from the steering wheel, even than that. And so that also helped save me, because I went back and sat in the seat, and the steering wheel is inches from my chest. You can't, I don't know how I got out of there. And then the other thing is, with wearing your seatbelt, every vehicle is designed to have the crush zone. The front end goes down, the back end goes up. Well, you got the bubble in the middle where you sit, and that's how they made them, and that's what it did.
Mike, as our crash investigator and driver safety expert, why don't you tell us a little bit about what we can learn from Nathaniel and Tara's experience?
Yes, for sure. And thank you for Nathaniel and Tara being, this is a humbling experience for everybody. And hopefully people will learn by this, young and parental. So the first thing is every parent needs to get with their attorneys and get a medical directive signed so they can see their sons or daughters if this ever happens and they're 18 or over, because without it, you can't. All right. So that's just the law. And then just moving on, if we can go to the dirt road. So as you see a dirt road, I don't know what your driving instructors have told you, but remember this: when you're on a dirt road, you're on marbles. Gravel moves. It's never solid. And that is the last place you get lazy. Now, Nathaniel doesn't remember what he did, but if you notice, this road is on a curve. And anytime you take your eye off the road where you're going, when momentum is going a certain way, you will go towards your momentum, which I'm going to guess is exactly what happened by the looks of where he hit. So if you notice that big brown spot out there, that is where he hit. Now, a lot of states have it where you have to taper your approaches, driveway approaches, field approaches. You know, so if somebody does go off the road and hits it, they will go off the road and hit it at an angle, so it brings it up like that. But most states don't do that. Iowa's farm country, so you can build that up. And what he did, that was like a head-on collision. He hit the side of a call it tree. He hit the side of a brick wall. And what happened is go to the next slide. As he hit it, his truck gave enough to bring him up over it and then on to the other side. So when you move that much gravel and you're not a front end loader, you know, I mean, his truck became a bulldozer is what it did. And trucks aren't made to bulldoze dirt, especially when it's compacted like it was. Okay, so let's move on. So there's the end of it. And then you can see how he went up and over. And from what I heard is the cost of that driveway, he did like $35,000 damage to it. So that's a lot. And that truck just bent up. And if it wasn't for the truck bending a little bit, so if you see the front of the truck, notice how that right front tire is collapsed into the front right side passenger well, or the foot well, the air pocket, okay? And Nathaniel talked that the truck did its job. The truck did its job, that its airspace did not collapse inside all the way. So what you see here is the inside of the car. And if you look at the bottom part of it, that is that right side footwell. All right, Nathaniel's head injury came from loose objects inside the car, guys. 12-pack of Mountain Dew. You want to know what a can of Mountain Dew does to the back of your head? Okay, put a Kleenex on the back of your windshield and crash the car at 40 miles an hour and it hits you like a 5-pound brick. That's a box of Kleenex. What do you think a 12-ounce can of pop does? A tire iron, a wrench. So Nathaniel's into mechanics. So he has tools in the back of his truck loose. You don't do that. Okay, we need, I mean, if you roll the car, all them things become objects. So, you know, you need to tuck them in, toolbox. It should have been, people think it's a joke, but seatbelt them in. You know, it should have been in the back of the truck. So, I mean, he is very, very lucky to be alive when I look at this truck. The burns on his arms, neck, that came from his seatbelt, guys. That came from the airbag. And it's from rubbing his clothes at a very high speed. Remember, those airbags come out at 200 miles an hour. And it's the friction that it rubs the material to the skin is where the burns come. They're chemical burns, and they're also rug burns. The seatbelt burns are going to be on the shoulder and the waist. Okay, those are good burns, guys, because why? It saved his life. Without it, he's gone instantly. There is no helicopter, all right? There is no emergency room. It's called the morgue comes. So, you know what? We can learn a lot from this, just as a parent and a child, a young adult that has to think a little bit, maybe make a little bit better decision regardless. And I'm going to stick to the story that I'm going to say he looked away from his steering wheel for more than a second. That's all it takes. There's a lot more that we can say about this because I see so many things. We could make a 2-hour video on this, but we touched the major points that need to be done. So you know what? When we say drive safe, ride safe, I mean, that is a title of our company, and that's what we want everybody to get the message of. And the message is any day you're in a car as a driver or a rider, you are at risk. You're at risk. Somebody out there is moving, and anytime you're around something that's moving, you can get yourself in trouble. So we need to be smarter, safer drivers. That's what we're all about. So, I like to close it with saying, I'm Mike Pehl. Drive safe and for sure ride safe.
Well, thank you, Mike, for your words of wisdom. And of course, Nathaniel and Tara for your storytelling. It was quite an experience, and we're glad you're still here, Nathaniel, and that you did many things right in that to keep you alive. So we appreciate it. Now, for those of you watching, you can get more safe driving tips here at drivesaferidesafe.com. And if you click on it and sign up with your email, you can get 5 surefire ways to keep your teen from crashing. It's a great email series. Of course, videos like these, you can sign up for free or subscribe for free at our youtube.com user DriveSafeRideSafe1. And you can go there and watch many of the videos that we have done to help out all drivers. Thanks again. Have a great day.